Hi, everybody. I am Misty Massey. I am the track director for the writing track at Con Carolinas, and I am delighted to be here with you all today. We're going to be talking about famous, exciting women in history and what they can bring to your fiction writing, and it's called Her-storically speaking.
Hi, I'm Natanya Barron. I'm a writer of fantasy and dark fiction and all kinds of things with monsters, but also lots of ladies and some lady monsters and some historically based lady monsters. So looking forward to talking to y'all about this stuff.
I'm Nancy Dunn. I typically write stuff with a lot of elves and magic and some fancy dresses, I gotta say. There's a couple of fancy dresses. But generally it's epic fantasy and a little lit RPG.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Christian, and I write paranormal romance with a little bit of contemporary thrown in there. I do not write historical romance, so I'm not really sure where that fits in, but yeah, that's me.
I am Leanne Rattel. I write young adult urban fantasy and an adult paranormal mystery.
So from Joan of Arc to Harriet Tubman, women have made history time and again for their courage and ferocity. Today, as I said, we're going to talk about our favorite women warriors, how we can use their examples in creating our own characters. So to get started, who are your favorite powerful women from history and what impressed you about them?
Well, I guess I can go first. My background is in medieval studies, so my research was all in the world of Arthuriana, which is not always necessarily 100% historical, but it certainly draws from history, and it's probably one of our first real, it's one of the most complete fantasy mythologies that is in Western culture anyway, that really kind of is a touchstone for people and goes all the way back to the 5th and 6th centuries in terms of its location. I was talking about this on Twitter last night, which was kind of funny, is that in spite of the fact that if you look at a lot of sort of contemporaneous mythologies of the time, which are definitely not, I would say, women forward, like the Charlemagne romances or a lot of the other romance of the time, women just kind of come here and there, or they're randomly in the woods, they sort of hang around. But in Arthuriana, there's actually almost always women at one point or another. They're not always the ones necessarily holding the swords, but also often they're the ones that are providing really interesting insight or being very complicated villains. You certainly have Arthur and his many sisters over time, who can be everything from accidental lovers to actual villains that are plotting to kill him. And then you have women that just like Nimue, who's one of the sorceresses that has tremendous power and is able to trap Merlin in an oak, the most powerful wizard of all time. And a lot of those draw on earlier Welsh myths in particular. Welsh and Irish and Celtic mythology had a ton of women warriors. Women actually had a whole lot more rights in Celtic and Gaelic culture than we even have in some places now in the modern world. Whereas if they felt that their husbands were not, performing up to par, let's put it that way, they could easily divorce them in a whole bunch of different ways and own property. And then you have Boudicca, who was one of the queens of the Britons, who had an amazing story. And I think what's really interesting is, in spite of the fact that it would have been very easy to have that character kind of disappear, we still have characters like her who show up and really serve as, just a wonderful story, but also women who were probably more women like that. They just made it through the pages. So I think it's pretty cool that we see that so early on in at least the Western tradition that sort of influences some of fantasy.
Nimue was my favorite when I was little. Camelot was one of the records that I played all the time, and I would act out the whole show myself because I was alone in the house. And Nimue was my favorite character, even though she has one song. She's on the stage for like 3 minutes, and that's it. But that song, I love that song so much. Are you familiar?
Yeah, I love Camelot. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I think we were both citing in May. We were both singing in the merry month of May on Twitter at the same time and sharing videos. Richard Harris will always be my most favorite Arthur. So.
Richard Burton is mine because that's the one I grew up with. So, but
I'm going to try really, really hard not to talk about a production of Camelot that we did at our local community theater that had ladies in waiting that were probably in their 50s and 60s, so they've been waiting a long time. It was hilarious.
Awesome, though.
Yeah, it was great, but we were like, Lord, what did they do? They were waiting a long time. But no, I'm kind of the same thing with Natanya. When I was thinking about this question, for some reason, I started thinking about mythological characters instead of actual historical figures, which I thought, why would looking back on it, I don't know why that made me think that, but
well, one would
but
argue there's a very fuzzy line.
Yeah, exactly. Well, some of these
Yeah.
people, they probably did exist, but probably not in the most fantastical way that the story says that they did. But my personal favorite is the Hindi goddess Kali. She's Kali the Destroyer, and she's kind of a villain in a lot of the stories. But I think she's amazing because she's always pictured with a skull necklace. And I remember going, that's so cool, being the little gothling that I was. That's so cool. So I looked it up when I was a teenager. And basically, when her husbands displeased her, she would kill them, skin them, wear their skulls on a necklace around her neck while she danced on their corpses. And I think that's probably the most accurate description of my personality, that there is. But yeah, she's one of my favorite. And then, like, any of the Egyptian female pharaohs, I think are pretty cool, because they kind of, broke the traditions of having having male heirs that took over when their fathers died or whatever. And I mean, Cleopatra's probably not the most feminist story. I mean, she kind of used her feminine wiles to get what she wanted, but I mean, damn, she used what she had to get what she wanted, even if she did have a tragic end. So, yeah.
And of course, Hatshepsut.
Yes.
She was amazing.
Yes.
I think mine would be actually not a character in a story, but Mary Shelley. I thought that in that day, to have a female writer write a monster story, and a very different monster story than had ever been told, and really stood up to the history of time. In the original story, she didn't actually go into how Frankenstein made the monster, but more showing the humanity behind the monster. So, and the fact that even in her own life, not condoning it, but she fell in love with a guy that was married and pursued him anyway. And so she was very forward thinking for her time.
Have you ever read The Stress of Her Regard by Tim Powers?
Mm-mm.
Mary
Highly
Shelley.
recommended.
See, it's not just me. She's one of the stronger characters in that book, and he from time to time he is accused of being a misogynist, but honestly, in that particular book, I thought he did a really good job of portraying Mary Shelley in a very true way, where she has agency and she is her own woman. So give it a shot. I'll put it in the liner notes.
Did she carry her husband's heart around in a box after he died for a long time?
Yeah, the ashes of his heart. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And his first wife drowned in the Serpentine in London, which allowed them to then get married. Poor Harriet. But Mary Shelley also lost most of her children before they were about 5 years old. So only one lived much longer. Very, very sad life. But we could have a whole panel on Mary Shelley. I'm 100% with you, Leanne. She is absolutely amazing.
Have you seen the movie Gothic? I just have to put this little aside in there. Oh my God, I love that movie. And Mary Shelley's character in that is just wackadoo, and I just love that movie. Thought I'd throw that in there.
Me too. I love that movie.
The other thing that I do other than write, which Misty knows because she's seen me there, is I am a performer at the Carolina Renaissance Festival. So a lot of my historical women that I have first started looking up and researching in order to do costuming, which I didn't do. Secondly, I was looking for just basically the place of a person with a dog in history. And it led me to all these portraits of all these beautiful women. And I think probably my favorite two women that I happen to do research on, one is very, very cliche, and it's Elizabeth I. But I loved Elizabeth I because she basically had a very, I hesitate to say balls to the wall, kind of philosophy about everything that she did. I mean, she just was like, you're not going to tell me how to do this. I got it. And I think we're just starting to see a lot of heroines being written that are along those lines of, I got this. It doesn't matter that I'm a woman. It's that I'm who I am and I got it. Okay. I know what I'm doing. But from Elizabeth, that led me to Grace O'Malley and the famous meeting between the two of them. And Grace O'Malley is actually somebody I'm working a character up for the festival for future. But I was like, I can't talk about Grace O'Malley with Misty on this panel because that's pirates and I just can't do it. So, but
sure you can.
and I find that the idea that a lot of people had that Elizabeth I was male was very interesting, because obviously she was doing something right, because they thought she had to be a man if she's doing, all of these things. And so that's my favorite historical character, that obviously I can't work into all the bits of her into one character ever, but she's kind of like a never-ending font of inspiration.
Absolutely.
I know I'm supposed to be the moderator and I'm just supposed to ask the questions, but I got to throw mine in too. When I was a kid, I read a book called A Taste for Scarlet and Miniver, which is a children's book, but it's about Eleanor d'Aquitaine, who was at one point Queen of England and France at the same time. Yep. And she was the mother of kings. She was the wife of kings, and she was just amazing. And if you've never looked into her history, people should go take a look, because she did some incredible things. But she's called Eleanor of Aquitaine.
Yes, and a huge patron of Arthurian stories as well.
Was she really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, that's neat.
She was my third choice.
Yay!
And I was like, oh no, we'll just go with these two.
Okay, so have you ever designed a character in your own work based on a woman from history that you admired?
I mean, I think there's always bits and pieces. And like I said, I actually, no, that's completely wrong. I absolutely 100% did. And I'm just about to finish this novel. And it's somebody that I wanted to talk about a minute ago. So forget that. So another amazing medieval person who's actually the first autobiography written in the English language, even though she didn't write it. She had a monk write it for her, because that was how she ran things, with Marjorie Kemp. And Marjorie Kemp was an English woman who's basically almost like the wife of Bath, but a real character. So she was this larger than life woman who was a businesswoman, a brewer. She really clearly didn't listen to her husband. And she had a mind of her own, that she wanted to be a pilgrim. She wanted to walk and take a boat for a small amount of time and then walk all the way from England to the Holy Land and chronicle it. And she definitely has her own special view of things. If you read any excerpts from her, she's kind of often a little bit ridiculed if you compare her to some of the other mystics of the time, who, while not always as lucid, seem to have a little bit more of a anchor into actual canonical beliefs. She kind of had all kinds of ideas about who was talking to her. But it's a really amazing adventure. And actually, I'm just about to finish this novel called Cinderglow, which is all about religion and what cultures do to exploit other people to create their own religions. And I wanted a character that was sort of this larger than life middle-aged woman who, would have the financial capacity to travel, but would also kind of at her heart have sort of this very pure connection to, there's thunder outside. So if things go dark, but this connection to spirituality in kind of an unorthodox way that's actually very true. And so her name is spelled differently, but it's Marjorie. And she's Marjorie Tam versus Marjorie Kemp. But actually I got the idea when I was traveling and thinking about pilgrimages, or pilgrimages as they were pronounced in Middle English. And it was really fun, because I remember just reading her stories and just being kind of taken that, this voice from so long ago who, was preserved for us, which I think is really neat. And a voice of a woman who was past her prime, which is very different in these days, but at that time, to be in your 50s and a woman deciding to go on her own and walk a distance like that and chronicle it was pretty much unheard of. So
I mean, I kind of think that everybody's female, strong, powerful female characters are sort of, I think they're all kind of based on these historical figures, because I don't think that these women were necessarily they didn't consciously know that they were being powerful. They were just kind of doing what they did and doing what they had to do. And I think if we as storytellers are wanting to tell women's stories, then we have to tell all of women's stories. We have to tell, we have to talk about everything that makes a woman So I think we kind of unconsciously do it whether we think we're doing it or not.
In my Hands of Time series, there are dream thieves. Their purpose is to steal seeds of dreams that blossom into unholy ideas that doom humanity in one form or another. And there's 12 of them, and there's essentially 6 female and 6 male, even though that gets a little blurred. But the ones that do the female roles, they each are unique and very strong, powerful women, but in varying ways. There's one her name's Makir, and she's my Amazonian woman. She's snarky, pixie haircut, biker chick that will fight and go in every war and, do whatever she has to. And then I have another character who's Nimue, and she's very prim and proper and, gets upset because she's got to go into this battle. And she's like, I'm in my Louis Vuitton heels and I don't want to mess them up, but she's this, big scientist and does more amazing discoveries that way. So I think there's also lots of different ways to portray women as powerful that don't necessarily mean like running in to do battle, but to fight in other ways that are, dignified and strong, that are different than a male would do it. So I kind of like Lex was saying, that, we need to tell all of women's stories, and we can be strong in various ways.
I definitely agree with that. I was actually talking over these questions with my husband going, I don't think I base my characters on anybody, do you? And he's like, yes. And he reminded me, because I think about the trilogy that I wrote, I think about it as this one giant massive thing. And he's like, you have to look at the stages that your female character, he should really be here instead of me. If I look at my main character, Jen, starts out, as they always do in these epic novels, as, the every person. And then she makes a series of choices that lead her down the path that carries the plot. And she has a lot of points where she's really strong when I think she's really strong when outwardly I think everybody else in the novel thinks she's very weak. And I like to think of her as making choices, going back to my choice of historical person, making choices like Elizabeth I had to make that were often icky and awful. And there were 10,000 other things she wanted to do, but she knew what she had to do to, in Jen's case, further the plot, and in Elizabeth's case, not lose her kingdom. Jen does a lot of things like she walks away from relationships because she can see, the chess player in me has her seeing, 3 and 4 moves ahead. So she knows, if I make this choice, this is going to happen, and it'll be great for a while, but not really. So she is able to make the hard choices. And not to say that men can't do that, but I think that sometimes, like you just said, Liam, we tend to think of powerful female characters as being the ones running forward with the sword, when really they could be the ones that have the sense to know when to charge and when to sit back and wait for a better opening to charge.
Many years ago, when I was workshopping my novel Mad Kestrel, which is about a female pirate, I had 2 older gentlemen in the writing group that I attended say to me that what drugs was I on, because there was no such thing as a female pirate. And I attempted to explain to them Mary Read and Anne Bonny and Grace O'Malley, and they said, no, those were camp followers and hangers-on. They were not real pirates. And I ended up, because I was much younger then and a lot less sure of myself, and these were older gentlemen who seemed to be very into what they were doing, and I was intimidated severely, and so I didn't fight with them anymore about it. To this day, I wish I had. But have you ever been criticized for writing female characters that aren't just decorative or hangers-on, and how did you handle it?
One time when someone said it, and they're basically saying Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel and Batgirl and all the female superheroes, the comment was made that that's unbelievable, that they're women can't do that, and it's just very misogynistic. And in that situation, I chose not to fight that battle, because sometimes there's this wall of their opinion that no matter how intelligent you can make your argument, you're not going to make a dent. So I chose not to fight that battle. But I've also had other people like, well, what if, why didn't you make this character a male instead of a female? One, that's not the story. And two, the story wouldn't have been the same had it been a male character, because I feel like women are going to approach things, I mean, it's a generalized statement, but, differently. Like, I don't know if you guys have heard, but, like in the MC universe, Thanos' male idea with limited resources is to eliminate half of life, when the female might have said, why don't we just double the amount of space and resources with the snap of the finger, since you have a thing that can do all powerful. It's like, why not think outside the box and make the box bigger?
My first novel, one of the reviews that I still remember, because I was pregnant and very emotional, and that's not a really good time to release your first novel to the world. But I remember reading this review and sitting in the basement of my godfather's house at Thanksgiving, and this man basically just slut shamed my main character every way to Sunday and said that she was, slutty and immoral, and how dare this woman be in control of her sexuality, which was actually not just fun to write and something I enjoy, but a major important part to the plot. And he completely, utterly, it was a male reviewer, didn't understand it. And the character herself is queer. And so he couldn't understand how someone would primarily be with a male character, but have had history with women and all this stuff. And that was really, really hard, because I just didn't, she was exerting power in a way that was clearly so threatening to this person that they thought the whole book was garbage. That one thing was enough to turn them from the entire book. And that was very weird.
Wow. I understand why you would be weepy over that. That would have broken me too.
I mean, I wept over bagels, so it,
well, yeah.
I would have got weepy and not even been pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember the Folgers commercial when Pete comes home from college and makes coffee to wake up the family at Christmas? Yep, yeah. I'm done. That comes on and I have to leave the room.
Folgers commercials are rough stuff.
They are. They really are.
I was just going to say, I haven't really gotten that feedback, but then I'm still early in my writing. So some of my characters have kind of started out being real, and then they just sort of end up being where I feel like maybe the audience thinks they should be. I have gotten a couple of comments about going the opposite way. One of my beta readers for my Wanderer, which is the first one in the trilogy, said to me, you know that Jen wouldn't really say that, right? And I was like, I'm sorry, what? I wrote this, so I know what she's saying. And he said, seriously, she's been through this and this and this and this and this, and she's gonna cry? She's not gonna cry, she's gonna rage. What would you do? I said, well, I'm not Jen. And then I got off that call and went over to my laptop and was like, do not cry, rage. There we go. So that was good feedback. And I think maybe if you ask me that question again after a couple more novels, I might have some more relevant answers.
I would I think I would have argued a little, though, because that was a man saying that to you?
It was, but it's a man that I know fairly well. And he followed it up with, I didn't say this earlier, but he followed it up with, because that sounds like what you would do.
Right.
And are you really Jen? And I'm like, no, that is a good point. So there was some thinking. I didn't just immediately go over and change it.
Sure. Yeah. I find that men very often don't understand that women's rage often manifests as tears.
Yep.
Because we're so busy trying not to murder whoever has made us enraged that it just leaks. you know? But if you trusted him, then
I like that, leaking rage. I like that. I'm going to use that next time.
That sounds like a great title.
All yours.
Not crying, I'm leaking rage.
Yeah. No, because crying is different. Crying is the Folgers commercial. Leaking rage is something entirely different. And you really need to go out of the house or get down the street or something away from me, because when I stop leaking, it's going to be a real problem. Yeah. Lex, were you going to say something about
I was just going to say, actually, I write romance novels mostly. and the primary audience for romance novels is usually women. But I have actually been criticized for my women not being likable and too strong by other women, which really pissed me off. I mean, it's not things like she's not believable, she's not likable. Why would the hero fall in love with her if she does such and such and so and so? And yeah, that really pisses you off, because I think that women, no matter who they are or what their personality is, they are still deserving of love. And I just thought that really sucked. It really pissed me off that a woman would say that to me, because all of it translates into she's too strong, she's too powerful.
Mm-hmm.
She's a ball-busting bitch.
Well, I think that there's systemic misogyny to the point that women don't even realize it. I mean, I know when I first started writing, all of my main characters were men. And then I had an epiphany. I was like, why am I writing main characters that are men? I mean, I've done it before since then, but it was like, wow, my default was that if I'm writing an epic fantasy, the main character has to be a dude. And from some people never get over that, or never get over a woman in a romance novel has to be a certain kind of woman.
Right.
I think that's what.
I mean, we could have a whole other panel about misogyny and romance. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that kind of thing is what led me to make Jen probably not as ball busting as she should have been, because I was like, I'm writing a woman. The woman is the main character. She's an elf, granted, but still she's female. And my male character is still very protective and all that stuff that you find in bad romance novels, not good romance novels.
Well, but the
stereotypical thing.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is I like to think that women can be all of those things, mm-hmm. and that men can be all of those things too. They don't. Mm-hmm. They can be protective without being assholes. Right. Women can cry at the Folgers commercial, and an hour later be stabbing somebody through the throat with the heel of their stiletto. I mean, I feel like we seem to, for some reason in our culture, it's like men have to be this way all the time and women have to be this way all the time. And it's just not true. And it makes for a really boring story, in my opinion.
I feel like that's what he was pointing out to me. He was like, you're falling back. She's gone through all this stuff, and now you're going to take her back to where she was at the beginning. Just doesn't seem right. And she does take the male character and kind of be like, I don't really need you. Again, with the Queen Elizabeth, I got this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we're kind of leading into this anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump to this question. What are some of the more annoying stereotypes of women warriors that we still haven't rid ourselves of in this day and age?
They're hard. They're bitchy. They're lesbians. I actually heard an idiot in front of me in the line when I went to, we were seeing Black Panther, and this guy in front of us in line was talking about it, and he just automatically assumed that all of the women in the guard, that they were all lesbians sleeping with one another. And I was like, did you not remember the part where the general and the other guy, what's wrong with you? Did you not? I didn't say anything, but I kind of wish I had, but I didn't want my husband to have to get beat up on my account.
That's the male gaze for you there. He was a little bit of wish fulfillment more than anything.
Right. Exactly.
I would like to see women warriors and leaders not be crazy. Yeah.
Yes.
For instance, like, Game of Thrones, like,
ugh.
Like, do I need to say more? I'm like,
no.
Oh, that, like, it just, like, no, you built up this, like, awesome character, and I won't say anything just in case somebody hadn't seen it and spoil stuff, but I mean, like, you built up this awesome, powerful, I'm not taking your crap female, and then just at the end, like, let's flip the switch and make her crazy.
Yeah, I think there's an inability to follow through, because there's something threatening about a woman who is okay with giving up being a mother and marrying and being ambitious. And I think I admire when there's a woman who's like, no, this is my destiny to be this person. And I think, Elizabeth, there's many queens who went above and beyond all over the world, and they they sacrifice things, and I think I get tired of the whole like, oh, I'm going to cry because I can't have a baby, or, you know, it's like we can have some of that, and that's okay. You know, for some people that is an absolutely important part, but it's also okay for women to be uncomplicatedly ambitious. Like how many male characters out there sacrifice everything to become king, or to be the chosen one, or to get the damn sword, or to get the chick, or whatever. And no one's going, is he conflicted about not having time to be a dad? You know, is he concerned that he's not also able to go grocery shopping and provide for his kids? You know, there's a major double standard, and it's okay if there's versions of that. Like, I'm okay with as many different kinds of female warriors as possible, but when the standard is accepted, it becomes just incredibly watered down, whether they're crazy, like you said, or, you know, they fall into a certain sort of militaristic stereotype. But yeah, ambition for ambition's sake is awesome. Like, know what you want, or like women who just want to hook up because they want to hook up. It's not like, you know, it becomes, again, it's very scary when a woman is like, I just wanted to have sex. That's it. Goodbye. See you later. People freak out when they read that, even in romance. You know, you see.
Oh God, especially in romance.
Yeah.
Especially in romance.
Yeah.
Wow. You know, that kind of reminds me of something that drives me crazy too. And it's more of a modern warrior thing, but in police procedurals, or movie or shows about first responders, or anybody that's a first responder, the spouse, it happens more when the male is the first responder and the spouse is the woman, but it happens the other direction too, that the spouse will immediately go, well, you're just married to your job, you love being a cop more than you love us, or military. And I grew up around military families because I grew up near the Paris Island Depot down in Beaufort, South Carolina. So I knew a lot of military families my whole life. And those military spouses, whether male or female, are tough people. They handle things. They don't just immediately start boohooing because their spouse couldn't get home for Christmas. And it drives me crazy on television or movies when the spouse behaves the way they do, and I'm leaving you because you weren't home for this holiday or for little Susie's birthday. They know what they're getting in for in reality, and it drives me nuts when we still in this day and age are still laying on that stereotype.
When you were talking about the female that will remain nameless from Game of Thrones, why does the female who saves the day have to save the day because she's been through whatever she's been through? Why can't we start, and I'm as guilty of doing this as anybody, but why can't we start with the character not having to go through all that stuff? I mean, I know some of it is you need that for the plot to keep moving. You need to have interesting things happen, but why do they always have to be so awful when it's going to be the woman that saves the day? Not that there are
trauma as a
admit.
Plot point. Yeah.
Yes, it seems like that is a little heavier on the female side than it is on the male main character side. And that's one thing my husband and I were talking about, like, I love Harley Quinn. She's one of my favorite comic book characters, but I can very clearly see why she's the way she is, and it's not anything anybody would want to emulate. Why can't we have more female heroines that have something that you want to emulate? Oh, I would like to live my life like that and be normal and, you know, go to school and know what I want to be from the time I'm 12 and go for it, instead of have to go through all this trauma.
But you know what, on the flip side of all of this, and I was sitting here thinking this, you know what I also find annoying? I also find it annoying that we are now ridiculing little girls for wanting to be princesses. I just find that very upsetting. I think, you know, if you want to be a warrior, that's awesome. If you want to be a princess, that's awesome too. If you want to be a warrior princess, that is even more amazing. I remember when, a couple of years ago when Carrie Fisher died, and someone had done a fan art that was, it was Princess Leia, but they had done her in a very Disney princess style. And I thought it was amazing. So it was my profile picture for the longest time on Facebook. And somebody they didn't jump on me, but I saw somebody was totally jumping on this, you know, they were ruining Princess Leia by making her a Disney princess. I'm like, Princess Leia wasn't ashamed of being a princess. She was all these other things, but she was a princess too. She had great hair. I mean, you don't spend that much time on your hair if you just don't care about it at all, you know?
True.
So, I mean, I feel like it's like we have to be, again, we have to be one or the other. We can't be all of these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the danger comes whenever there's just an assumed default. And I think there are people and there are readers out there certainly who pick up books and they expect something. And there's so much that feeds into what that expectation is. And that's when they get upset. It's when, you know, that main character is not behaving in a way that they deem is either socially appropriate. And it's, you know, having a daughter, it's like, she loves princesses. I love princesses and unicorns. I totally get it. But I wouldn't want it. But there are families where it's like, no, you can't do anything. You have to be princess you.
Right.
And just like, you know, you were talking about before, like, for this character to be interesting, she has to go through rape or sexual abuse or be in front of a murder to make her complex enough and empowered enough to make a difference. And that's, yes, for some characters that's super important, but not everyone has to go through that. And in terms of Game of Thrones, that seemed to be a prerequisite for most of the female characters. And it was like, seriously, like, women are other things than wombs and people to be sexually abused. Like, that there's a lot that can happen in their lifespan that would grow their personalities that doesn't involve those things.
Right.
I did like Brienne of Tarth in Game of Thrones.
Oh, yes.
So I thought, you know, she was that 12-year-old that wanted to be you know, a knight, but still, you know, was interested in men and, you know, had crushes and, you know, so I thought she was a very good character and stayed, you know, pretty well throughout, you know, wanted to protect the family and, you know.
I feel like we know more about her than we do about the others. The others were just, we knew about them because of what X, Y, and Z did to them. But for her, I feel like we knew a lot more about her, which made her more interesting to me.
And yeah, this is going to spoil it, but whatever. It's been out long enough. I loved, there were so many problems in the last 2 seasons, but I loved when she was knighted for real, because I thought now that actor is amazing anyway, but when the look on her face when she was finally knighted told you more about what she had been trying for all this time. And having a love interest was really not the be all end all for her. The being knighted was the beginning of her new life. You know, she's like, finally I have been knighted and now I can move on to this new life. And I thought that was beautiful. So
I love that she was completely oblivious to like the redheaded dude like hitting on her. She's like, she totally didn't get it.
I know, bless his heart.
I've never seen an episode of Game of Thrones, so I'm just sitting here nodding.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Like,
Now
y'all are great.
I've ruined it for you.
Now I just totally want to go watch Game of Thrones because y'all have made it sound so amazing. Except for the last 2 seasons.
Yeah,
some of it is, and some of it's not, and so that's what makes it hard. Is because some of it was really, really good, and then sometimes it wasn't.
Oh.
Do you believe depictions of female-led violence help or hinder the furthering of female empowerment?
Do you mean females committing the violence, or?
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right. Whether it's fighting in a war, you know, rescuing somebody or attacking somebody just because, I mean, whether it's good violence or not good violence, if you can even have that sort of thing, but just female-led violence.
That's a really big question. I think that
It
violence in itself is, you know, kind of in the hands of the writer to do and to do well or to do badly. I love good action scenes, but I kind of prefer killing monsters and things that are super evil to people, or like sort of senseless serial killer violence. I think women statistically just don't tend to do that. Not that they don't, but it you know, it can be a thing. I think for some people it's important to know that women can have that kind of power, but I think it's also important not to just mimic the narrative of violence and figure out what is different about it, kind of way back to what we were talking about with the Thanos problem. Like, it's not always as simple as that, but there often is another way to look at something. If we're just simply recasting a female character that could be any other character, what are we bringing that's new to it? I don't know that it is. So I think it's up to the individual and how they do that.
And I'm just thinking if, the violence is for violence sake, or if it's like an act of terrorism, I mean, that's abhorrent violence, no matter who's portraying it. But if, I think showing a female that's not afraid of, getting her hands dirty, if you will, and the ultimate goal is to, protect someone, whether it's, throwing yourself in front of somebody or, getting rid of a threat that's going to harm in the future. I mean, that's a powerful story, and it's similar if a male or female does it. So I think you're kind of like Natanya saying, it's really on how and why the violence is there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, and like you said, I think it's all about the motivation of the character. I have not seen Atomic Blonde, even though I really want to, but I hear that Charlize Theron commits a lot of acts of violence. And I'm not really sure what I like I said, I don't know what the plot is. I haven't really seen it. I think that the danger is when you have a character like that who is in a role that is traditionally a male type action role. You fall into that role being sexualized and fetishized, which absolutely doesn't do a whole lot for female empowerment. But I mean, I think you have to. I really just think you have to consider the motivation of the character. I mean, if you think about Wonder Woman in the big scene that she has where, they're like, oh, you can't do this. And she says, but, I have to help these people. And he's like, but we can only do that. And she's like, well, that's not what I'm going to do. And she goes out there and has the big moment and all that.
No Man's Land.
No Man's Land. Yeah. That's like my favorite scene. And I cry every time.
Yep.
And it's because her motivation, yes, she is committing an act of violence. Yes, she is, killing some of those soldiers. But her motivation is very feminine in that it's a nurturant sort of thing. Her ultimate goal is to protect the people in this town who don't have anybody to fight for them. And she doesn't feel like the men are looking at the people, they're just looking at the goal. So in that sense, that female-led violence I thought was really empowering, and it felt very, very, very empowering, and it was very impactful for me as a woman. Much more so than Charlize Theron killing somebody with her stiletto heel. So, okay. If that makes sense.
And I hate to do this, but we are out of time. So I'm going to real quickly run down and let you guys tell our viewers where they can find out more about you, your website, social media, whatever. So Natanya, please.
Sure. So I am at natanyabarron.com, which is, first, last name. On Twitter and Instagram, I am at Natanya Barron.
Great. Nancy?
I'm at nancyedunn.com. And on most of social media, I am nancyD_rights.
Okay. Lex?
You can find links to all of my social media and everything that I'm doing at my website, which is lexchristian.wixsite.com. Yes, I suck. I still use the Wixsite thing. But yeah, it's lexchristian.wixsite.com.
Okay. Leanne?
Same thing. Links to all my social media as well as my newsletter is on my website, which is leannembertel.com.
Okay, and I am at mistymassey.com, where you can find links to my social media as well. Ladies, thank you so much. This has been a really great discussion, and I hate to stop because I think we could have gone on a whole lot longer, but I really appreciate you being with us today, and I hope that next year we can all be together in person to talk more about this kind of thing.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.